Okay, this is a 3v3 battle, and the deal is that originally I wasn't going to post-replay this battle, but I watched the replay and I found 3 or 4 interesting teachable moments that I thought would be interesting to share with everybody. So I decided to fire up this replay again and show you what was on my mind. And I paused the game right when the spawn occurs. And to give you the cast of characters, we start on our side of the map, playing as Ottamans as Point Man, who has a YouTube channel you've probably seen if we scroll down the map. That's me. I'm Jay Martin. I'm playing as Prussian. And our partner in this game was a guy named Napoleon Bonaparte, which I'm not a huge fan of the name. It makes you look kind of like a noob. But I think, in fairness, this guy actually was French. He spoke in French a lot. And he's really new at the game. He's like a 1-star. He didn't have a whole lot of experience. On the other side of the map, I scroll over to our opponents. This is Spartan Emu. And in the middle, we have a Spanish player whose name is Don Siglo Criaza. Might be mispronouncing that. Don Siglo. Sorry about that. And on the far side, playing as Austrians, is The Don Part 2, who's a player that I had the chance to play with quite a bit. Before I get started with the replay, the 3 things I want to touch on are playing as the Ottomans, which I featured in a couple of my battles recently. So Point Man plays the Ottomans here. We're going to figure out how he does it. And the second issue is reacting to the Spanish guerrilla units, which is something I have to do. And the third thing is something for new players on how to assault an opponent, which our buddy Napoleon Bonaparte here winds up having to do. So, here we go. And this battle's kind of long, so I'm going to have to cut out a little bit. Try to stay with me on this. If you pan around to my rear, I was originally kind of predicted the Spanish guerrilla units, and I did that by positioning these 3 musketeers here. This is obviously not the correct way to do this. My thought was that the most vulnerable thing, and Point Man and I exchanged chat as the game was loading, is that we might have to protect Napoleon Bonaparte over here because he's a new guy. So I put these 3 musketeers over here mostly to defend against guerrilla units that might spawn in his rear. However, my opponent, who's directly across me, the Spanish guy, spawned his guerrilla units in the rear of me. And I was sort of prepared for this because I had my eye on it, but kind of a weird thing happened. When I panned over, I just saw these 3 units here, 1 cav and the 2 infantry. I totally missed these 2 cav over here, and this will make sense when you watch how I react to the problem. So as soon as I see this, I immediately charge. I only have 2 cav units, but I charge them into his cav and this body of infantry, and I'm moving my musketeers to get into position. What I sort of miss is that his cav is charging straight at my general. Now, I do sort of react here. I form square and start doing my musketeers, but the one thing that I don't do, the most important thing, is to move my general. So he gets a real sweet cav charge into my general bodyguard. Point Man actually gives me an assist here. He moves a couple of his cav in to handle it. Back here, I'm actually doing okay. I'm positioning more line to fire at this cav. And I'm really impressed. My little general bodyguard is down to 4 men already, and my general hasn't died. So I get pretty lucky, and we're obviously going to rout this cav here pretty quick. We do rout the cav, and my general bodyguard survives with 3 men left and then randomly routs. Come on. I mean, my general's still alive. What's the deal? Back over here, we're going to surround these guys and kill them. No big deal. Point Man's charge here is kind of unnecessary because I have infantry in the neighborhood. But he does it. That's great. He pulls back real fast to avoid running into the square or whatever. At this point, I have 4 line units running in to just completely massacre these guys. I mean, that's a Spanish guerrilla unit with 3 chevrons and the lights with 1. That's a lot of money got sunk into that. And I'm going to pause the battle here to take some stock on it. What has happened sort of strategically to this point is that my opponent invested a lot of money. Those guerrilla units are expensive, and he put chevrons on most of them. Invested a ton of money into the guerrilla units. Now, the return he got for that investment was he killed 2 of my cav, and he killed my general. Killing my general could be a big deal. It could not be a big deal. The way that killing the general penalty affects the game mechanic is that for the first, minute or 30 seconds or so that your general dies, your units are really, really vulnerable. So if you can follow up killing a general with a big-ass head-on assault, that's great. You're going to have a huge morale advantage. But this guy killed my general, and he's still way on the other side of the field. My units are just kind of getting in position, and I'm recouping. So I'm not real sure that in this instance that the investment of those 5 units with a bunch of chevrons for my 2 cav and the 1 general were really paid off. And strategically, what I think you need to do, let me come back to this one in a moment. The other thing that happens, you'll notice, is that this really retards my development up the field. If you look at the mini-map, you know that on my right, Point Man is way up the field already, and I haven't been able to get my units in motion, because I've been really concerned on my micro has been back here. I kind of feel like our opponents, the Spanish, really didn't do anything to take advantage of the disorder they caused in my army. I mean, all my micro got devoted down here. Now, obviously, this guy is having to use his micro down here as well, but if they could have timed this disruption with, say, like a big advance, both the Austrian and the Spanish concentrate on Point Man who's moving up the field already, they could maybe both engage him with me being out of the picture. Like, they could get a pretty good 2-on-1 on him. They didn't do that. And so I think that any potential advantage they would have garnered from this guerrilla action here sort of got left behind. From another perspective, the Spanish guy, you'll see it says idle right there. I mean, oh, sorry. The Spanish guy here, even if he was just wanting to disrupt my line and then move forward to get a good rush on me, isn't really even doing that. So, you know, it did have the effect of retarding my deployment up the field. But if you don't combine that with your own aggressive movement on the other side, I don't think you get a whole lot of value out of it. And in fact, I think they got negative value at it. They put a whole bunch of their money in here to these guerrilla units that nothing really happened. I want to take a time out and talk about something else, and that if you notice, I hold down space, my units are all fucked up. My game has this weird bug. I'm curious if anybody else has it, but every now and then, like 1 out of every 5 games, if I hotkey units together and then I go select that hotkey, like if I group these 2 units together as like group 1, and then I select one, it doesn't let me give them commands anymore, so I have to either ungroup them or switch them. Anyway, it really makes moving your units around if you're using hotkeys really difficult. You'll see how ridiculous. And this is because, the reason this looks ridiculous is because I'm having to move my units 1 at a time, which I'm not very good at, which caused me problems. I want to fast forward in the battle a little bit. Oh, timeout. I want to move back over to Point Man. I was going to talk about his Ottoman build. Timeout. Point Man's Ottoman build he's obviously separated into 2 units. Sorry, 2 sides, or kind of 2 divisions. On one side of his line, he has 3 infantry units and a meat shield in front of them. He has the remnants of his cav. I think the cav he used to control the guerrillas were the cav on this side, and so he has 3 cav units over here. This is obviously the holding group. He just wants to kind of hold you in place here. This is his big assault group. And so he obviously wants to turn the right side of this person's line. He has a meat shield in front, he has 3 infantry and 4 janissaries. Dude, these guys have 6 fucking chevrons. I mean, they're going to fight to the last man. This guy has 4 chevrons. A lot of chevrons on his janissaries. Now watch more and more good players play with janissaries. They put a ton of chevrons on him. Behind there, he has 4 shooter cav, and he's got his general hanging out. So, on the Ottoman subject, Point Man obviously wants to make a big push on the right side and then kind of roll his army up from this direction. This makes a ton of sense in a 3v3. If you can turn the flank here, he can possibly catch the Spanish guy when he finishes routing the Ottomans. So that's what Point Man's doing. At this point in the battle, which is, I think, my catchphrase, I'm trying to just get my lights up and get engaged with our opponent. I'm going to click fast forward. What you'll notice is that on the far side of our line, our partner Napoleon isn't moving. He isn't doing anything. And this is really bad in a 3v3 because you're going to notice, because I'm lagging in the middle, that there's going to be a danger that Point Man's going to get beyond me, and the Spanish guy will have an opportunity to flank him. That's not good. Point Man actually compensates by this. He's going to move part of his left side to guard his flank against the Spanish player. That's my fault. I should have been there in the middle for him. He shouldn't have had to do that. I, of course, was retarded by the guerrillas. It caused the problem. But that shouldn't occur. I think when you're playing a 3v3 and you're in the middle, you want to keep everybody together. Your job is primarily to not let anybody else get flanked. Compounding this difficulty for me is the idea is that our partner on the left is not moving at all. And eventually what I have to do is, remember these 4 infantry back here that I used to kill the guerrillas? I wind up having to use these guys to control the flank of the Austrian, because the Austrian's going to engage Napoleon here, and I have to divert 4 infantry units just to protect my flank here, and that's a really bad use of resources if you're playing in a 3v3. Ideally, Napoleon would advance and keep in line with me. So next time you're playing a 3v3, think a little teamwork and try to get involved there. This is what I was talking about, Point Man's move to control the flank of the Spanish player. That actually works okay in Point Man's strategy because, once again, he's going to turn this flank. His assault here is actually really good. He charges his meat shield in to occupy these guys. He gets his guys, his infantry in firing position, and he's about to send his Janissaries in for melee. I'm not really sure what he's got a shooter cav behind. Now, I was going to mention, I'm not really sure if the shooter cav shooting behind your own line will hit your own line or not, or if because they're mounted and they're taller, maybe they shoot over the backs of them. But Point Man does that. He actually charges here. What Point Man has going for him that's pretty clever is he has sort of 3 lines of engagement, or 3 lines of fire. He has the Janissaries in melee, backed up by shooter line infantry, backed up by shooter cav. That's a whole lot of firepower, a whole lot of strength put on one section of his opponent's line. And you'll notice as the replay continues, he starts to route units one after another real fast. He actually breaks this cav into the rear of his opponent. And you're going to notice, I'm going to turn away from what Point Man's doing here in a minute, but his ability to crush this flank occurs really fast because he's focused so much power. Yeah, I mean, the left or the right side of this guy's line just dissolved. I mean, quite literally dissolved. And he's able to focus so much power on one point of the battlefield, and I've talked about that before in other videos as a really important way to control the battlefield. I think at this point, Point Man's opponent actually rage quits, and this becomes controlled by an AI now, which just makes Point Man's job easier. The Austrian AI starts to randomly move. If I scroll back down the line, I've finally engaged the Spanish guy, and I have light support. Here's the bottom line. Again, I'm able to concentrate firepower. We're both, Point Man is hooking me up. He actually has a meat shield charge in here. He's going to be pretty good. Point Man's only problem at this point is that he's being too successful, and he's running the Austrians to the other side of the line away from where his power is. So his job right now is catching up with his success. He's trying to do that with his cav here. But again, he's almost been too successful. He's chased the Austrians to the other side of the field. Somebody's general dies, probably the Austrians. Back over here, Napoleon has had a small engagement. I believe what happens is that the Austrian player, the Don Part 2, realizes that his allies are in trouble. I'm doing pretty well against the Spanish, and he also realizes that my flanking force is about to show up, and he retreats from that. Again, Napoleon, you got to get in the battle. The Don pulling back here, the Austrian player pulling back, creates a problem for me because he can actually flank me here. And in order for me to prevent that, I'm going to have to wind up stepping way, I'm going to have to deploy an axis right here, which is way in Napoleon's, sphere of the battlefield. I think a few minutes ago, I'd actually messaged this guy and I said, hey, you need to start moving. You got to get involved. And he replies, oui, because he's French. And he actually does start moving. But if he hadn't moved and the Don was a little more aggressive, the Don could have shifted his axis of advance right onto my flank here. As you scroll through my part of the battlefield, you notice I'm not terribly organized against him fighting my micro skills with unable to use hotkeys. I am able to position. I mean, regardless, Napoleon's inaction over here forces me to move my foot guards sort of into his zone, and I'm threatened to get hit by 2 lines of line there. But we are gradually going to turn the flank. And I'm going to cut out of this part of the battle